Okay, hello, welcome back. I am actually currently on vacation, so I haven't posted in a while. First off, so it's not going to be distracting for this video. This is my shirt, How to Pick Up Chicks. Best way to do it. So, um, so I saw a news article that I thought I'd talk a little bit about because it is fascinating. It has a lot of repercussions. We're going to kind of look at the pros and cons of this entire thing. So apparently they've managed to introduce a new mental health diagnosis for essentially video game addiction or video game obsession. We're going to start with the good parts of this. First and foremost, if you have a problem in the mental health field, any sort of problem, it becomes a lot easier to understand and to treat if you have a diagnosis, if people know exactly what the problem is. Um, there's an old saying that kind of applies, but really doesn't. I'll just say it. It's once your problem has a name, it's no longer your problem. That's not entirely accurate. Once your problem has a name, you're able to handle it. You're able to deal with it. It's not stop being your problem. You just can cope with it better. And that's kind of how mental health things work. It makes it easier to cope, easier to deal with. And looking at a lot of these extreme cases of video game obsession or addiction, this is probably a needed diagnosis. There are certain people who need to have this diagnosis. The example given in the article I read was a young lady, a 9-year-old girl who became obsessed with a game called Fortnite. Now, for those of you completely unfamiliar with this game, I'll kind of explain the mechanics of it so you can kind of understand quite what this little girl was doing. So Fortnite is an online game, and the main component of the game is what's known as a battle royale. Basically, they put 100 people inside a certain area, and they have the area constantly constricting so that it gets smaller and smaller, basically. And basically, each player battles it out until there's only one player left, and that player wins the game. Usually these games, depending on how good of a player you are, can take upwards of 30 seconds to about, half hour or so. Probably average person is in there for about 10 to 15 minutes. Like I said, I've never personally played it. It's not really my style of game. So that's how that game works. You can't pause the game while you're in the middle of a game. However, since the games are often quite short, you have plenty of time to go and take breaks and balance it out in that regard. Apparently, this young lady had become so obsessed, 9 years old, remember, with constantly playing this game, that she would wet herself. She wouldn't take a break to go use the bathroom. And that's always in the mental health field, that's always a sign. If you can't be bothered to go do something like use the bathroom, there's a problem going on there. And so, yeah, in certain cases, yeah, this seems to be a very good diagnosis and a very positive way for someone to proceed forward, maybe get the help they need, maybe learn how, in terms of like other addictions, to either balance it out or pretty much stop doing the addictive behavior, which in the cases of a lot of addictions, completely stopping doing the addictive behavior is a lot better than trying to balance the addictive behavior and control it like that once you get to that point. For example, an alcoholic is much better stopping drinking altogether than to be, say, a social or a casual drinker. So yeah, these are positive points. These are a good thing to have in the mental health field. Now, there are negatives, and the article assured us that less than 3% of people who play video games would get this diagnosis. So if you play video games a lot, or if you're a casual player, I would probably be a casual player. I do it, after work, or when I need some rest time, a few hours here and there to play a video game. Get a new video game I might play a little bit longer because it's a new world to explore, that sort of thing. So I'm kind of a casual player. So I would hope I won't get this diagnosis. And I think most players, even players who play more a professional level or a lot more than I do, would probably be nervous about getting this diagnosis. But it's supposed to be less than 3%. It's supposed to be with people who obviously have the problem, like this, the 9-year-old that was given an example. But yeah, that's so part of the thing is who's going to get labeled with this. And I have a great deal of experience working with people in mental health field, both on both sides of people who have mental health problems and people who try to work and deal with it. And one of the biggest problems is everybody wants to diagnose everything. um, so to give an example, I had to attend a workshop on fetal alcohol syndrome. Basically, it's the effects that alcohol have on a baby, and then how that person has grown up and matured when they have these effects going on with them. And one of the things they stressed in it was, don't diagnose this. You're getting this mainly because some of the people you might be dealing with or working with have this. Some might have it, just so you know how to deal with it. When we got out of there, just about everybody, a lot of the people in there started immediately diagnosing everyone they worked with, everyone who had a mental health problem with having fetal alcohol syndrome, when in many cases they quite obviously didn't, or, we aren't qualified to we aren't qualified to diagnose someone. And we shouldn't be doing that. And it takes a lot to diagnose somebody with fetal alcohol syndrome. So my concern is that a lot of people, whether they work in the mental health field, whether they're parents, whether they're teachers or whatever, are going to hear about this, probably look it up online, and then diagnose people they work with as having this when they, in fact, do not have it. They might meet the criteria, but meeting... Okay, here's a fun thing. Look up in DSM-4, or DSM-5 now, I haven't read DSM-5, and you can actually find that you meet a lot of the criteria for a lot of the mental illnesses. It's not just meeting the criteria, you have to exemplify the criteria. You have to be constantly doing that. And people don't always realize that, so they're quick to say, oh, you obviously have this mental health illness, and so on, if you're just, a casual player or whatever. And that's going to happen. Yeah, that's kind of my concern, and there's going to be people who do that. There's no getting around it. That's a problem with any mental mental health diagnosis. Left out the G there. It's going to happen. Now, the second problem, and this one is the one I consider to be a lot bigger, there's a certain degree of fads that go on, and this is especially true of parents. Parents like a good mental health diagnosis of their children. Now, the reason they like to do this is because, they like to say, well, it's not my fault the kid turned out this way, and, here's an excuse, and here's a simple solution. We'll just do that, and I can still call myself a good parent and then go get martinis all day long. And I'm disrespecting a lot of parents by saying that, and I apologize, but that seems to be how it goes. For a while, ADHD was the diagnosis. If the kid had a lot of energy, they say, oh, this is hyper. They take them to a doctor, and certain doctors will say, yeah, we'll go with that diagnosis. And then they give the kid a drug, which the drug doesn't help a kid who doesn't actually have ADHD. The drug's not going to help them. In fact, it's actually going to make them worse. So it was a really bad situation for a while. And that was kind of starting to phase out. I think it's still around, but it's kind of starting to phase out. Towards the end of my working in the mental health field, and they started to phase in something called ODD, which is oppositional defiance disorder, which is a natural part of a kid discovering who they are and discovering their personality, essentially, to a certain degree of defiance, saying, no, I don't like this, no, I don't want to do this, no. And that's very natural for kids to do that. And the actual diagnosis, but a lot of people would come to doctor and say, my kid's really defiant. They're saying no a lot, and parents couldn't cope with that, and so they get this oppositional defiance disorder, which is not a good label to have because it's essentially a child version of a sociopathic personality disorder. So, not a good thing to have. I've worked with a lot of kids. There's only one kid who I thought might have this ODD, this particular disorder. And I wasn't qualified to diagnose it. I don't know if this kid ever got diagnosed, so I can't even say if this particular kid actually had it or not, just that this kid exhibited signs that were consistent with it. That's all I can say about that. Now, the reason I'm making a big deal about these and this diagnosis is because diagnosis is pretty much the stickiest substance since, an unreconciled grudge. It's a very sticky. It will stick to you for the rest of your life. You get diagnosed with something, you have it for the rest of your life. It doesn't matter if you don't have it or not. It doesn't matter if you exhibit the complete opposite signs. You have that diagnosis, people will have it for you, and you will be judged by this in the mental health field and so on, unless you can get someone to change it, which doesn't happen all that often. And so, if we're going to suddenly label someone who plays video games as, having a video game addiction or obsession or whatever, I don't even know what they're going to call this, VGA, VGO, sometimes VG philosophy. Ooh, I must have an obsession with VG. Couldn't be I have an obsession with philosophy. Weird. But yeah, that label is going to stick with people probably for the rest of their lives. And it's, I can pretty much predict this is going to be one of the fad diagnoses that a lot of parents are saying, my kid seems to be spending a lot of time playing video games. They're going to get this diagnosis regardless of, whether it's healthy, whether they're doing it in a healthy way or not. And most video game gameplay is pretty healthy. Most games teach things. Even the adult games teach things. BioShock 2, for example, which you wouldn't think would teach you a darn thing, is actually one of the best games I've seen. If you play it all the way through, I'm going to emphasize that. You need to play the game all the way through. It's one of the best games that teaches you essentially how to be a parent. It teaches you probably one of the most important lessons of being a parent is taught if you play all the way through that game. Or a game like Hitman, which teaches you lateral thinking. The current version of Hitman, I've never played the old ones, so I have to qualify things nowadays. So video games can have positive effects, and even the ones that don't, they teach reflexes, timing. There's a lot that's taught in video games that people don't realize they're learning something. And so it's not a negative thing to play video games. It becomes negative when you can't stop, when it becomes an addiction or an obsession or something like that, or, when you can't stop a video game long enough to use a bathroom, you might want to seek professional help. And, there's a lot of little signs like that. So there are good aspects to this, but it's very much what I like to call abuser-friendly, which means people are going to go out and they are going to abuse it. And, we're going to get a lot of false diagnosis of this. And, we're going to get a lot of ignorant people, labeling someone like me as being a video game addict because I post video games online. Whoa, I must be addicted. Anyway, regardless, that's my take on this whole video game thing. Like and subscribe if you like it, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.